There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Fine Arts Center podcast with hosts Bri and
Hannah.
And introducing our guest today, the Director of Fine Arts.
Hi there. Hi, everybody. Mr. Popat coming from the Fine Arts Center Recording Arts Practice Room.
Yes.
How you doing?
Pretty good.
All right. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Sorry, there's background jazz.
That's probably an appropriate categorization, yes.
Yeah.
That's background jazz.
That's improv.
I guess.
Oh my gosh. So to kind of start this off, what made you want to be the Director of Fine Arts?
Well, I think for me personally, it's the ideal job. I happened to go online in January of 2019, and I had actually visited Greenville about 9 years ago, maybe. And my wife and I loved it. And so I went through all the process of getting my principal certification. I said that word weird. Certification for South Carolina, which it's not too involved of a process, it's reciprocal between the state of New Jersey and here.
Oh, okay.
And I started applying for middle school principal jobs because that's what I was doing at the time. I was not particularly aware of the Fine Arts Center. I'd seen it on a tour just from the outside and thought, oh, neat, but really didn't think of it as a possibility. And then, so I hopped on the employment page and saw it was there and started reading the job description, and it said, we're looking for someone with an artistic background who has building administration experience. I'm like, perfect.
Wow.
So that's in the town where my family wants to live, or I want to live. And, when you're doing middle school principaling, it's very rewarding, and I loved it, and I love middle school. No, I'm actually being serious. There's no video for this podcast, so you can't actually see that I'm serious. But there is a but to that sentence. And pursuing this job was a no-brainer because I was not done with arts in my career. I was still playing the saxophone. I deeply missed being a band director as much as I love being a middle school principal. I went into administration so I could have an impact on a larger number of students than just those that were in my classroom. So, it just kind of is still a dream to me that I get to still be a leader of an organization, but that organization does arts and does it like we do it here, which is pretty fantastic.
It lets you play, so.
Yeah, that's cool too. I'm back on my saxophone.
I remember one time last year, before one of our concerts, I got here early and you were just walking around playing saxophone, and I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Well, that was a key component of the job. It was not in the job description.
Can play sax.
Well, it's in the job description. Everybody else, the faculty all are supposed to be practicing artists. So what does that say about me? I have the ability to be a practicing artist. So I just feel it's an integrity thing. If I'm going to expect the students to practice and struggle and work hard, why shouldn't I be doing the same thing? That for me is like a big leadership thing, is I try to not ask anything of the teachers or students that I would not be willing to do myself.
That sets you very far apart from some.
Well, it's, there's a lot of leaders like that out there, and, it's just, that's what you do.
We need a lot more of them.
Well, maybe conditions in this crazy world are setting people up to do that.
I hope so.
Like you got to have a little bit of hope about things, and I think, there's plenty of bad leaders, but there's plenty of good leaders. There's, you can see the bad in the world, you can see the good in the world. So I know a lot of leaders who will do the same thing, and I wasn't in the military. I wanted to be, but the term is filling sandbags. Like that is one of the, according to the books I've read, I have no experience, but one of the most annoying things to do is fill sandbags for bunkers. And a leader grabs a shovel and fills them with their troops, because there's nothing above what a leader does. We mop the floors, we move chairs, we help with everything. So that was a really long answer to a short question. Sorry.
That's what always happens. We never get through all of our
Better
questions.
than getting through all of the questions immediately and having nothing to say.
You will not have that
True.
problem with me.
Yeah.
I love the microphone.
So, what made you decide not to join the military?
I was not rebellious enough of a child to go against my father's will. My father is a very traditional Indian father. So at least at that time in the house where I was growing up, my will had no bearing on anything whatsoever. So I bought the books on the Marine Corps, and the leaders that I follow, many of them are former military or current military, and I just have a immense amount of respect for the discipline that lifestyle that it takes to be successful. I'm just and I guess fortunately or unfortunately for my kids at home, they hear and see my own personal discipline that I, because the best kind of discipline is self-discipline.
True.
It's not
Fair.
something that you impose on someone else. So I'm not all about the myth or truth of the military where you can just yell and get things done. I'm more about the discipline that it takes to do things the right way and to dress appropriately and to act appropriately and have like a standard. Like I believe you should have a standard in your life no matter what you do, whether you're an artist. There's like a standard for what humans should do. Like there's a standard for kindness. And it gets a little frustrating. Well, yeah, and just, you look in the world today and that's like seems to be something we're forgetting. So as a principal, I just try and like make that the first most important thing that we do here in the Fine Arts Center is like be kind and humane to one another. And what's cool is our students who come here just want that too. So it's not something we have to impose upon people here.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things, like especially in the arts and everything, because it's so personal.
Mm-hmm.
It's so personal to somebody. So for somebody to come in and just like be the school bully and like totally absolutely destroy you,
Mm-hmm.
it hurts.
Mhm.
It hurts a lot more. I mean, even genuine honest critique is like, ooh, okay, that's all right.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. Well, about the bullying thing, like that's been always something as an administrator that I've been like sensitive to. Like I have no time or tolerance for that. Like, and I'm lucky that we're in a school where the students all share that same feeling. Like this, it's just so. But what you said about critique is really interesting because I've been thinking about that, and I just I had a really great epiphany in a dance studio yesterday, and then like normal, I tried to express it to Miss Michelle, and it was not an epiphany whatsoever. It was so poorly worded. But basically what I was thinking about is like we're our own harshest critics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No.
It's just like when I said to everybody in the beginning here, the students, like, you may not feel worthy to be here, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. So I'm like really into just the approach of the dichotomy of life, right? So like, and so being a harsh critic is good as long as you keep in mind your perspective and your journey, right? Because no one's going to be harder on your performance than yourself. So when I listen to a recording of myself when I'm playing, I'm like, ew, yuck, right? And so if Steve heard that, well, I guess that's a bad example because I'm his boss, but let's say another jazz musician heard my recording, they'd probably say, yeah, man, and so which one of those two is good? Well, I sound terrible is not good because that's not true. And yeah, man is also not good because it's not true. Or if my mom heard it, she'd be like, oh, that's so great, sweetie. Well, that's also not good. So somewhere in the middle one of my favorite quotes is somewhere in the middle lies the truth, right? So we have to be able to be our own harshest critics, but also employ grace. Like, okay, that did not sound great. Why didn't it sound great? Okay, well, my rhythm was a little off. Okay, let's work on that. And that's one of the things I want our students here to think about is when you're dancing, for example. I know you both aren't dancers, but when you're dancing,
definitely not.
no, and me neither, but pay attention to your lines, pay attention to what the teacher's saying. If the teacher is giving you specific feedback, that's actually good. Like, non-specific feedback means that you're far from where you need to be. An example of non-specific feedback in the music world would be, you need to learn your notes and rhythms, right? If a teacher says that to you in music, that's not good at the Fine Arts Center. Elsewhere, it might be okay, like if you're teaching a kid music and for the first time and they have to learn their notes and rhythms. So, like, I would imagine in visual arts, it would be something like you didn't mix your colors well, or, right?
The value is smudgy and just looks messy.
Yeah, your perspective on this. But then if you're getting feedback from, if students, if you're listening to this, and you're getting feedback that's like super specific, like I came into the jazz studio the other day and I put on a metronome, or had 3 students put on a metronome, and I said, your quarter notes do not match. That's actually good, because you're good enough to now be working on that higher level concept. So artists, if you're listening to this, like, be harsh but graceful to yourself, right? Like, be brutally honest, take a look at the performance and say, eesh, that maybe wasn't so good because it wasn't so good. Like, this was off. And then be graceful to yourself and say, well, let me look at my drawings from last year. Okay, it's much better. So, because it's all about perspective. Like, when you're an artist, you're finished with your progression. This is a little dark, but you're finished with your progression when you die or when you stop making art.
No,
Like,
I mean, it's
however
true.
long that is. So if you quit tomorrow, then you're done. Or if you're like Pablo Casals, a famous cellist, I think he said it like age 96 or something. I think I'm just starting to get it. Like, that's what it's about. It's about, if you chose art, you chose something that it's going to take a long time to figure out.
I think one of the best things that I've either read or had somebody tell me was that if you don't look back at your older drawings and cringe, you haven't improved.
Correct. It's humbling, and students. Okay, so the most important component of leadership is actually humility, and I'll argue with anybody about that. It's you have to be able to look at yourself, own your mistakes, and realize that you're responsible for reaching everybody in your building, no matter what their personality is. That's your job, right? And as an artist, it's also to be humble, to listen, and to go, okay, I need to work on this, and then go to work on it without any judgment on yourself. Just go to work. You will get better if you go to work on it. It's guaranteed. Sorry.
No worries. Another question we have for you is, why did you choose the saxophone as your preferred art?
I wonder about that.
Okay. So it's very little chance of my mother listening to this podcast. I'll tell her, and maybe she'll listen to it, and she'll hear that I'm still a little bitter. Because when I was in 5th grade, we got to pick instruments. In New Jersey, they start band a little bit earlier than here. And my mom was like, you're playing clarinet. I'm like, why? She said, Benny Goodman. And to a 10-year-old, that means nothing. But I appreciate your intentions, Mom. And I played clarinet for like a year and a half. And then somebody showed me a bass clarinet. And I'm like, ooh. So I switched to that. Did that for half a year. And then somebody showed me a baritone sax. And I went, ooh. And then that was it. Like, I was a baritone saxophonist from 7th grade through the University of Miami. Like, the first time I ever picked up an alto sax was in undergrad at Virginia Tech, because we needed to access literature outside the baritone sax. Like, I guess equating it to visual arts, it would be just picking up a different medium. But the amount of literature, performance literature for bari sax is very small in classical. Yeah, so I got an alto, and then after getting an alto, I started messing around soprano and then tenor. So sax, I guess it just was kind of a organic progression, you know. I from what my mom made me do to eventually what I wanted to do. But I did not get good at it. For those of you who are listening who are critical of yourself, like, my light bulb went on between junior and senior year. I've always been a late, like, bloomer as far as getting a clue. So any of you out there who are like sophomores, juniors, and you still are not getting it, you know, the light bulb comes on, hopefully sooner rather than later. And it happened on the summer between my junior and senior year when I miraculously started to practice. And then imagine that.
Wonder how that works.
It works, but I'm definitely not a naturally gifted technician. Like, I need to practice, whether it's golf, New Jersey when I played on the church softball team. Like, I needed to practice. I have to, everything I do, I have to practice. I'm not naturally gifted enough to just be able to pick up the saxophone or whatever and just do well.
Yeah.
I get that. I was never like great at drawing, you know? I
Yeah.
was never top of the class. I was never like really amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I even got waitlisted for here.
I didn't know that.
But one of my biggest things is like, okay, fine, let me do it again.
Mm-hmm.
So like the entire summer before I auditioned, I practiced exactly what I had to do
Mhm.
for my audition. I practiced
I love that.
drawing portraits. I practiced drawing my hand with an object in it. I would not stop doing that. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it was like 3 things a week, which is not fun on your hands.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to get here,
Mhm.
so I really tried.
Yeah.
It paid off though.
So, some of our best students are those who got turned down the first time and reapplied. So, to our listening audience out there, that's why one of our core values is grit. You know, we do hard stuff. You're going to fall on your face, and I give you so much credit, Bri. Like, that I feel that that's rare compared to the number of applicants we get who don't reapply, because that first no is like the dream crusher. Nobody gets to crush your dreams. You get the final say in that. Like, that is on you to determine that I'm done. And it's okay if you're done, but then you're done.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So good for you. It's awesome.
Yeah. And my story is a bit interesting because when I first applied here, since there's not really a classical piano program, and that is really what I consider my main area of expertise, I guess, I decided that I would audition for several things here, and I was pretty interested in seeing if I could get in either for chamber strings or for
Mhm.
visual arts. So I auditioned for those two, as well as architecture and jazz, because I didn't know jazz piano, but I figured if I could get in, it would be interesting. I got turned down for both chamber strings and visual arts, but I got admission offers for architecture and jazz.
Wow.
And I was like, well, jazz, to me personally, seemed like it would be more fun for 4 years. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And so over the past few years, I've had to practice a lot, just engaging in the mentality of switching over from classical to jazz piano,
Mhm.
which feels to me like 2 different languages, 2 entirely different, with a few similarities, just 2 different worlds.
Yeah.
And so I've just had to force myself to learn a whole lot over these past 4 years.
I can totally
Yeah.
see you in architecture. Oh my gosh.
Well, that's a really cool story, and I think having been a classical saxophonist first, the only thing that transfers over is the technique.
Yeah.
And in some ways it gives you an advantage. You can sight read maybe better than some of your peers. I noticed that, like, when I got to the University of Miami for my master's, the students were better improvisers than me, but I had, because I was a music education major, performance double major at Virginia Tech, the doubles were not a problem for me. I could play flute, clarinet, bass clarinet, and I could sight read. And they would always, like, I'd be jealous of them and they were jealous of me, which is, I think, generally the case in most friendships you might have in the Fine Arts Center. Like, oh my God,
Yep.
you're so good at that. Well, yeah, but you're so good at that.
Miles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every time I see one of his paintings, I'm like, there he goes again. He's gonna get that. Of course. I'm like, all right, back to the drawing board.
I
Gonna
bet you
try
he
again.
says the same thing about you with clay, with ceramics. So.
Yeah, we have a like tiny joke. I was like, okay, I'm the 3D person, and you can be the 2D person.
Love it. I love it. Yeah, it's you know, it's what Hannah, what you're doing here, Bri, what you're doing here. Every student in this school, whether they end up doing it as a professional or not, is gaining this valuable experience of being uncomfortable in a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I wonder if there's any psychologists listening to this podcast, but if so,
I hope so.
I hope so too. So Vygotsky had this thing called the zone of proximal development. I know about this from my educational administration degree, so it does come in handy. And that is, it's a zone that you're in where it says, zone of proximal development, where you're doing things that are hard, but you're supported while you're doing them. So it's not, if you go past the zone, you're in the zone of frustration where you're doing something that's hard and you have zero support. Okay, and that's usually when people quit. Or underneath the zone is where you're doing something easy, and then underneath that is when you're doing something easy and someone's doing it for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we're striving to put our students through every day in the school is, can I push them, but also have a relationship with them strong enough where they can come to me and go, okay, I tried, I need help now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we really want.
Yeah. Also, another question I have for anyone who's looking, especially to go into music school for college or just any art school in general, what was it like going to college in Miami and having a program there and going through that? Or, like, is there any insight you can give into that?
Well, it's changed a lot since I graduated from there. I graduated with a degree in jazz education, and now it's so much better. When I went through, it was basically a performance degree with a couple of ed classes and an optional recital. I did the recital and I did the ed classes. Now, those students who do jazz ped get to actually direct a band and troubleshoot through it, and that really would have been very valuable. I had to learn a lot of the things that I learned in that degree after college by badly conducting a jazz ensemble, having someone better than me come in and go, try this, and me having, not being afraid to try it. So again, if you humble yourself and you're willing to learn from others, you can grow. So most of the stuff I learned was from Julius Tolentino at Newark Academy, who's like the best band director, jazz ensemble director like on the planet. But I digress. What was it like at Miami? I entered in January because I graduated in December from Virginia Tech because I stayed an extra semester to get the performance degree with the recital and blah, blah, blah. And so my first ensemble as a graduate student was the freshman sax ensemble as a 22-year-old. So, I mean, it was what it was. They put me where there was space, and I didn't complain, and I just played as well as I could. But it was overwhelming because coming from Virginia Tech, I was the big fish in a little pond. And then when you get to Miami, there are freshmen that are better than you will ever be. So you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror and go, okay, I am what I am and where I am, and I can either crawl into a hole and quit, or I can get to work. So I think maybe in 2.5 years down there, I went to the beach like 3 times.
Yeah.
The rest of the time, I was in a practice room 5 hours a day trying to catch up. And because I played bari sax, it gave me a little bit of a quicker path to the top than a tenor saxophonist might have. So my second year, they put me in the studio jazz band, which is the second band, and I got noticed, and I got asked to play in the top jazz band on bass sax, which is really weird. And then I just remember being in a practice room, and the director of jazz studies, who was terrifying, walked in and said, if you stay here for the full year instead of graduating in December, you're going to have a very good year next year. So that meant I'm going to take on more debt because I'm going to stay an extra semester.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
But he didn't need to say anything else. I was like, let's go. So I just called my parents and said, I'm going further into debt. And they said, it's not our problem. We're not paying for grad school. and I stayed, and it ended up being probably the greatest musical experience. The thing is, students who are going to college for art, it doesn't get, it may not get any better than that for you, unless you're top notch and as far as a musician and going to play in like New York in the Vanguard Jazz Band. I was in a jazz ensemble with students completely in their prime with nothing to do but practice all day. You don't have kids, you don't have a job, you don't have a mortgage. You're just there to be great. So college art school is exhilarating. It's and if you get good enough where you can do that for a living, it's an amazing feeling. But definitely have a backup plan, and be open to skills that you're not aware that you had. I never, ever thought I would be. First, I never thought I would be a music teacher. Then I never thought I'd be a school administrator. I never thought I'd leave New Jersey. I mean, like, you just be open and try stuff.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of my own mother, because when she was in college, she was a visual arts major, and she specified in painting, or specialized. Wrong word.
It's
Oops.
okay.
It worked. I'm with you.
But then after the whole 2008 recession and all of that, she decided she needed to start her own business in order for us to keep making money. So she decided to venture into graphic design. And then nowadays she works as a marketing executive for Greenville Federal Credit Union. Yeah. So she's in a very different place than she used to be. And so I still try and encourage her to paint every now and then. But yeah, this probably isn't where she could have seen herself 20 years ago.
Yeah.
20 minutes ago. Wow, that's fast. 20 years ago. But it's just interesting to see where she's ended up as well.
If you keep an open mind, it's very freeing when you come to the realization of what you want to do and what you don't want to do. I remember very succinctly when I was like, I am not going to be a professional jazz saxophonist full time because it is not in my desire to create new vocabulary for the instrument. Like, what I have to say on the saxophone is what many people have said before. Doesn't mean it's not worth listening to, but if you hear me play, you'll hear me play at the faculty recital on Friday. Yeah. I'll try and be myself and play my style, and maybe that's cool, but it's nothing like what the top 1% of the 1% are playing, and guess what? It's totally okay. So young artists out there, like, just be patient, try and detach, take a step back, continue to make your art, and you will find the slot where you're supposed to be in, and that slot, like your mom's, Hannah, may change, and that's okay, because eventually you got to make money.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, man. I remember when I was like, okay, I'm going to do art in college. I was like, ooh, I'm going to be broke and living on the streets.
Maybe. But the reason why I maintain one of the reasons why you go to college is to make connections, right? Those connections that you make, if you choose your location wisely, if you choose, like, seniors will ask me, what's your biggest recommendation about college? I'm like, unless you're going to go to grad school and you know that already, go to a school in a location where you want to live and work, because when you start building relationships with people, relationships are what get you hired. Your talent does not, because your talent is important, but if there's a million graphic artists out there, you're going to hire the one that you met that made a good impression upon you, that seemed really nice, that shares values. So, and think about that. Think about all those things when you're making your choices in life. Is it really boils down to, can you get along with others? Can you be cool? And just and be able to work with a multitude of personalities out there without losing it.
Yeah, you got to be that guy. You have to be, oh, hey, I know a guy.
Yes.
You have to be that guy.
You have to be the guy. Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Be the everywhere man. Everyone knows you somehow. You don't always know how people know each other, but it's interesting the people I've met who know someone I know
Oh yeah.
from a completely different context.
Mm-hmm. The world is small.
Very.
So careful what you
Ooh.
say.
Man, well,
This has been fun. I
It's been
I got
really
more
fun.
time. And let's see.
you do?
Yeah, you sure we can go on a little bit if you have a couple more
Awesome.
questions.
Yeah, we do. So one of our questions
Mm-hmm.
was, how's the student climate? Because I don't feel like a lot of people who maybe aren't at fine arts understand the weird climate. I know in Greenville
Mm-hmm.
County, people are like, oh, that's the weird school. That's where the weird kids go.
If
They're not
by
wrong.
weird you mean students feeling comfortable
Yeah.
doing what they want to do with other people who are doing what they want to do, then I fully embrace that as a alternate definition of weird.
Mhm.
I think the student climate is great. I will never be satisfied with anything in that. I always want things to improve, and climate changes. Now our students are back in school. We are, I guess they say, in the endemic instead of the pandemic.
Yeah.
So that's got a different feel to it, and students are reacting differently. Everyone has feelings after being involved in the last 2 years of how that went. And then, our newer students missed out on well, they didn't miss. They received the instruction, but they probably received less. You hear a lot about like, oh, the students lost information. You can't lose something if you never had it. So
Mhm.
so they just I'm very mindful of that. Now that we can kind of breathe in the same room with one another, we're just trying to make time to get to know our students better and let them know that we care about them. So, yeah, that's what our climate is here, and it's easier to do when you have 200 students in the building
True.
than
Yeah.
when like Wade Hampton has 1,800 students in it. So we can say you can't compare the two. You just can't.
Mhm.
It's completely different. Any high school with us. So I would say when I go out to schools and when I talk to parents about what we're looking for, yes, talent is important. Teachability and is more important. Tenacity. I would rather have a student who is passionate about learning jazz improvisation versus someone who comes in with all their licks and thinks they know everything. It's very difficult to teach someone who doesn't want to be taught. So yeah, that's our deal here. We're just a happy little place for students to be themselves and to hopefully feel accepted and loved from the minute they come into the door to the minute they leave.
Because we all want to be here,
Yeah.
We all tried out for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
all we all really tried to get in here, and most of us, I feel, are pretty appreciative of our time.
I think so. I think some students also come here to discover, like I have conversations with students who are like, okay, I do not want to be a professional blank after being
Mhm.
here. And so we'll help them find a different program here, or we'll find a plan to get them through the year, because that's okay. It is totally okay if by going to a culinary school, we're not a culinary school, I'm giving another example, you figure out that you don't want to be a chef. At least you tried. Now let's pivot and figure out, because your education here is transferable to any place on the planet, as long as that place likes professional values.
That's so true. Oh my gosh.
You could do anything. You could do anything because you learned how to be on time, how to meet deadlines, how to be creative, how to figure stuff out. What an environment that's healthy feels like.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. I will say, I definitely do appreciate the climate here very much. I feel very safe and I feel very welcomed. So it's
awesome.
a great environment.
I like it.
I know I have to go to another appointment. So as we're closing, my favorite people to be around, and this is not saying I don't like being around the adults. I do. I like talking with parents. I like talking with teachers. I love being around the students. And my kids are auditioning for this school next year. So, I try and treat all the students like my own children. And I look at school, and I always have as a leader, as would my kids want to come here? If the answer is ever no or meh, we got a problem.
You
I
have to
didn't do
think
my
about
job,
it.
right?
Mhm.
So yeah, I want it to be what you all deserve, which is that kind of vibe. So
Aw, that's sweet. Well, you're
Well,
doing a really
thanks.
good job. You're
well,
doing a really good
thanks.
job.
Yeah, we got it. I appreciate it. I'm not good at taking compliments, so I'm going to say thank you, and we're going to keep on working on it.
Ah, man. Well, thank you so much for being on here. We really
Appreciate it.
appreciate you making the time out of your day.
Let's do it again. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe we can talk around the midwinter doldrums. Because we're working on a
Yeah.
winter dance here, and then we have anti-prom, and the next thing you know, well, I don't want to say that because y'all are seniors, right? I want to say the next thing you know, we're
I
done.
mean, I've got a sibling here, so
There you go.
yeah.
You're not going anywhere. You're an alumni next. So, thanks for your time. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you, man.
Awesome. Likewise.